Welcome to our Data Tables Accessibility Workshop. In this training, we will review table markup, requirements for accessible tables, tips and tricks for improving the accessibility of your tables, and where to find additional resources. Data tables have different programmatic parts that you may see represented on some platforms. These include TR for table row, TH for table header, TD for table data, table for table, and caption for your table caption. Tables build the structure for table rows, while table rows build the structure for table headers or table data rows. Here is an example of how you would see these programmatic elements displayed in an HTML format and what that will translate to in a data table. You can see that the table elements incorporates all of the additional parts. Your table's caption element is added directly after your table element. 3 table rows incorporate 1 table header and 2 rows of table data. These elements combine to form a simple, accessible table. When building accessible data tables, the first thing you need to confirm is that your table header is defined. You will need your visual table header to also be a programmatic table header. This builds the foundation for assistive technology to meaningfully interact with the content in your data table. In this example, the data table has a visual heading that is the same as its programmatic heading, meaning it will present an equal experience to both visual and non-visual users. When building tables, be sure that you're only using your tables to display table data. Do not use tables to stylize your layout, build flowcharts, or present other non-data content. The example on our left is a table that is only presenting tabular data. The example on the right is presenting a visual layout of classrooms and would not be an appropriate use of a data table. Be sure to include a table caption with your table. Table captions help users find the table, understand what the table is presenting, and determine if they would like to review the table in full. Sometimes table captions are stylized to look like a title for the data table. In this example, the table caption lets users know that the data table is presenting information about training dates, times, and locations. When you are making your table, be sure to define the scope of your table header cells. By adding a scope element, you're defining what the table header cell is associated with. This helps users navigate through your data table and ensures that the correct information is associated together. Adding a scope to your table does not change the visual appearance of the table. If your column is a header cell, you will use scope equals COL, and if your row is a header cell, you will use scope equals ROW. Here's an example of how you will include scope in your table structure. This is a similar example to the table we discussed earlier, but with the scope defined for both the row and the column headers. Scope equals COL has been added to the table header tag for the column header. This will help associate the information in the column with the column content. Scope equals ROW has been added to the table header tag for the row headers. This will help associate the information in the row with the row content. Whenever possible, do what you can to simplify your data table. This improves both the accessibility and overall usability of your table. In this example, a large, complex table with multiple merged cells has been broken apart into 2 much more simple data tables. This helps users find the content they are looking for more quickly and ensures that your table is more accessible to assistive technology. When designing your data tables, be sure to avoid the use of merged cells. Merged cells are more difficult to interpret by end users and are more difficult to build accessibly. For these reasons, we recommend avoiding merged cells whenever possible. Make sure you avoid adding empty table cells, especially empty header cells. This makes it more difficult to navigate your table with assistive technologies. Don't add a screenshot of your table in place of a functioning table. Turning a functional table into an image makes it much more difficult, if not impossible, for assistive technologies to engage with the content. In the example on the left, we have a true functioning table, while the table on the right is just a screenshot of a table and lacks many of the accessibility features we need to include to ensure our data tables are fully functional and usable for all end users. Here are some helpful hints for improving the usability and accessibility of your data tables. First, separate your data. Each separate piece of data should have its own data cell. This makes it easier to navigate through your table and understand the relationship of the information. In this example, the data table on the left has a different table for each piece of data, but the data table on the right does not. This will make it more difficult to read and interpret your information. Second, visually distinguish data cells from header cells. In this presentation, header cell information has been visually bolded to make it easier to distinguish the header cells from the data cells. Third, add zebra stripes to your data table. Zebra stripes refer to adding a different style for even and odd rows of a table to improve the readability of your table. This is particularly helpful with very large tables, or tables with more than 5 rows. In this example, the header row is bolded, while every other row has a slight gradient change in the background. Building accessible data tables is slightly different for each platform you're working with. Here are additional resources on how to build accessible data tables on different platforms, including Open Berkeley, Microsoft Word, Adobe PDF, and in Google Docs.